going to give a talk today on automotive cybersecurity defensive engineering. My name is Scott Sheahan. I've been with the Car Hacking Village here with Jay Turla, and then my friends from Singapore as well. So the title of my talk is Blue Team Tricks. I'm part of the blue team. I've always been part of the blue team. I've never been part of the red team. I feel maybe there's a lot of glory that the red team gets, right, when you hack a system, and the red team gets to take the glory. But on the defensive side, I've been doing this for about 5 years in automotive, and I design the embedded systems and defenses for the vehicles. I enjoy it. Maybe it's not as sexy or maybe as cool as some of the hacking, but I'm going to go over through some of the automotive defenses that are now in the vehicles. And so yeah, this is me. I guess I'm going a little bit out of order. I come from Indiana in the United States. Michigan is the head of all the automotive stuff in the United States, so all of the car companies are there. I chose to move down to Indiana during COVID because I could work remotely from Indiana, and I live out in farming country, and I like working out. So my neighbors are farmers. I prefer that than Detroit. So this is my first time in the Philippines. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, Jay contacted me and was like, yeah, that sounds great. I want to come to the Car Hacking Village. Has anybody seen this show? Maybe not. I don't know. Raise of hands. This, just as a cultural reference, I live apparently where this show is set. The town of Hawkins, Indiana, is supposed to be 30 miles from where my house is. So apparently I'm in the realm of where Stranger Things took place. But no, we don't have. I haven't seen the monsters, so I just figured I'd give that cultural reference. I've been in embedded systems for the past about 10 years. I studied some mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering, and I've always loved robots, cars, and I've been able to work at I started off in aerospace, was working on some embedded systems on radar jamming. Then I went to Ford. They make a lot of trucks and vehicles in the United States, and was part of their cybersecurity group. And I've been basically, ever since I went to Ford, I've been in different areas of the supply chain. So the cars are made by the OEMs, and Jay has a Mazda out there, but then the parts inside the cars are made by various companies, call them Tier 1 suppliers. And these Tier 1 suppliers, Bosch, Continental, Aptiv is another one I worked for. I worked for this company here. They make a lot of the computers in the vehicles, but you might not have heard of the company names. And now I do consulting, just kind of freelance consulting under Rustic Security. So the talk, I figured I'd give an Art of War reference. Sun Tzu said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. So blue team, red team. I'm giving the blue team side, hopefully, to maybe some red teamers. So I'm giving you the guide to automotive cybersecurity defenses, so when we meet in our battle, it'll be a fair fight, right? And you think of vehicles, we use our vehicles to get everywhere, and there haven't been any known real-world attacks on vehicles since about 2015 at DEF CON. Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek gave a real-world example where they could actually remotely take over a Jeep through the internet. And the vehicle architecture was not ready. They didn't have any security engineering in the vehicle. And so really they did a lot of neat work, but it was open as far as, think of the internet in the 90s. There was no really security protocols added on top. The vehicles in 2010 to 2015, there's no real vehicle security engineered into the vehicle, so you don't want your vehicle to be attacked when you're on the road or trying to get somewhere. So for the overview, you start with a vehicle chassis. You have the motors, the powertrain, the insides of and basically what I work on is the electronic control units, which are the computers in the vehicle, and then the wiring that goes throughout all the vehicle, which is the wire harness and the in-vehicle networks. And this was from, there's a company in Detroit, Monroe and Associates, they tear down vehicles and they reverse engineer this. I was at their facilities and took these pictures. So the vehicle architecture has changed drastically since we've had cars for about 100 and maybe 20-something years. Early 1900s, cars came around. In the 50s, this is from my previous employer, Aptiv. They have a blog up here where they talk about the evolution of vehicle architecture. Things have changed drastically. It started out as a very mechanical system because they didn't have all the electronics in there, right? And then you see in the 50s there was an emergence of like some of the lights inside the vehicle and the headlights and the taillights, but not really much electronics to hack. So Jay would have been bored in the 50s. In the 80s, you see, so here we'll go through the 80s. You can see that there's definitely more wiring into these mechanical systems. And then in the 2000s, you think about like all the different mechanical systems that are now augmented with electronic systems, like your fuel injection, your infotainment now. All these things are electronics, and they call it the vehicle like a computer on wheels. So you can see the amount of wiring and the amount of data going through the vehicles is just increasing, and it's going to increase further, which means we're going to have jobs, right? So, the vehicle is organized into many different functional domains. Since 2015, they've segmented the architecture. One of the best defenses as a defensive engineer is you can segment your architecture so that hackers have a harder time going from one place to the other. So hardware and different network segmentation is one of your best defenses. So you might start with a vehicle architecture and have different vehicle buses that have different purposes. One might be for the body control, so like your light controllers and your radio controllers or your window controllers are not going to be on the same bus as like your engine controllers, because that would not be safe. So we have them on different buses, and then you might have like the engine control down here, powertrain control on another bus, and then you have another bus that might be for some advanced driver assistance options. All of this is now segmented out into different vehicle domains for security. So how do we secure a connected vehicle? It goes back to threat modeling, and I actually grew up in a place that's kind of remote in Montana. So in Montana we didn't have many people, and you think about the threat model. I'll go back to like a building, because I think a lot of people relate to this, and we'll bring it to the car after this. So if you think of a building and you're securing a building, everybody knows kind of like the defenses that may be like a corporate headquarters or enterprises, the headquarters of Ford in Dearborn, Michigan. The security defenses here, the security threat model is way different than if you're like in a remote town in the middle of the mountains. You don't have to worry that much about people attacking you. You don't have to worry about people trying to steal your trade secrets. So the threat model is very different. It depends. That's often how for security engineers, right? If you're going to invest money into defending a system, then you need to justify it with your threat model. So quickly, I'll just say, I'll get to this for the vehicle, but I kind of was thinking about what different defenses could you put in and how much money, if you had a lot of money and you really wanted to defend your building, what could you do? You could have like different turnstile gates, bulletproof glass, a moat. If anybody has seen Andor, the electrified floor, I don't know if you guys seen that. If you have enough money, you can make all sorts of defenses. Access control for the different people that come in, security guards, video surveillance, special sensors that might be sensing thermal, like body heat, or motion, or glass breaking if it hears the glass break, and an alarm system. So you can obviously, if you have enough money and you have enough resources, you can design your defenses to keep your system secure. That we do the same thing in the vehicle. It's all about your risk model. So again, going back to the vehicles now, the vehicles, the old trucks that Ford made, obviously you didn't have to worry about somebody hacking them. Jay wouldn't be able to get to it because as long as you keep those doors shut, the vehicle internals aren't going to get hacked. And really, this is at the time when there wasn't that many electronics in the vehicle. But now we go to a modern day vehicle, and This is the F-150 Lightning. I got to work on some of these cybersecurity defenses for this vehicle. Now, this vehicle has, I put the remote symbol there, but it has a telematics control unit, so it's hooked up to a 4G or 5G modem, meaning it's connected to certain elements of the internet. Of course, it's not directly hooked up to the internet, but it has the means to get out if it needs to. So this is, before, about a week ago, I was working on this diagram. I posted it to LinkedIn and got several comments from colleagues about different defensive categories for automotive cybersecurity. And I'm just focusing on the in-vehicle electronics. If you go outside of the vehicle, there's a lot more than this. But I'm going to go from left to right in the time that I have and go over a little bit of each category. Of course, I won't have time for all of it, but automotive cybersecurity, why I love it is because at every layer, from the hardware layer on the left to the kind of application and network layers over here on the right, there's a lot of different defenses. And so all of your traditional enterprise IT defenses are present in the vehicle. Just it's kind of like its own small enterprise network in the vehicle. So for a little bit of background, in the vehicle you have low-level modules. These are your low-level controllers. They control all sorts of vehicles. In Jay's vehicle out there, I think there's probably 100 to 150 small computers. And the lower-level modules are what we call AutoSAR. It's like an automotive open systems architecture. It's kind of like a real-time operating system that controls these low-level ECUs. So that's the operating system. These vehicles that have the low-level modules are present for these low-level controllers. They generally have a little bit lower-level security control. So we're talking about embedded system defenses. And it's not like they're running Linux. So yeah, your infotainment runs Linux, but these lower-level controllers often just run, it's called AutoSAR Classic. Then you go into some examples of the lower-level modules. You have powertrain control. That's like your engine control. Body control, which is like your lights and doors and locks. Chassis, which is kind of like your steering, maybe your steering control and braking, and then maybe some safety-related options like airbags and that sort of stuff. Then the opposite, I guess, in the hierarchy is the connected modules. These are your most cybersecurity critical modules, and so they have the most cybersecurity defenses. You have your telematics control unit that has your modem, your cellular modem inside, so you can get access to the data that you need to run your connected vehicle. They're generally running a rich operating system, so something that's like Automotive Linux or QNX is another rich operating system that I've seen in there. These operating systems are like generally POSIX based and have a lot of features that you'd see like on a normal PC, security features. And they generally also have a lot more security defenses built in because you want to prioritize these ones. Now some examples, again, you have telematics control, your infotainment, your gateway module, and then ADAS is advanced driver assistance. So that's what does your like automatic braking or your cruise control. That's what ADAS is responsible for. So level number one, and really quick, Jay, could you give me a 15-minute warning and then a 10 and a 5? Sure. If I'm running over, because I can go through these, and if there's questions, if you guys have questions on a layer of the defense, feel free to ask it while we're going through it. So hardware defenses, this is where security starts. If you can change the hardware, the actual printed circuit board, or the processor that you're running, then you have such an advantage, right? This is early on in design. You can make a lot of good security controls here. So talking about your printed circuit board layout, if you choose ball grid array chips, these chips have little contact points below them, as opposed to some of the surface mount where you have the wire going, the wire is accessible. So ball grid array chips are preferable for security because it's much harder to get to those metal connectors underneath if you're doing hardware hacking. Having buried traces, so the traces, a lot of these circuit boards have multiple layers, and you might have the most critical like data communication routes internal chip-to-chip communication be in the middle layer as you're making your PCB. The other thing that you can do with hardware defenses, you have security internal memory. So on this chip, this is the microprocessor, this is the system on chip. Right here, that's the main brains of this chip. There are a couple other subsystems in this chip. This is a board that I worked on at Aptiv, and this is the Advanced Driver Assistance Module for, it went into the Ford trucks. So when I was here, we had, the threat model is very different because in this chip, you have internal memory, but you can't, as a hacker, you can't really get access to it. It's inside this plastic case, and the die, the actual silicon die, you don't have access to. I mean, I guess if you have enough research and time, I'm sure there's some top secret labs that can do that. But it's much harder if you keep your safety critical and security critical memory inside of that chip, as opposed to, I'll just pick a random chip. Maybe there's like some other external flash chip that you're trying to store a file system on. If you store it on the external part and there's a trace in between, then as a hacker, that's much easier to get to. So architecture-wise, I always put a lot of emphasis on your architecture. And then the blue team intentions here from my side, I want to increase the time and effort it takes for a hacker to take over my system and then make them spend more money, because again, we're talking about money it's hard to come by, and hackers don't have infinite money. So they don't want to go after the hardest systems, the most controlled. This is a Rivian module. They make electric trucks. Now, the next part of hardware defenses you might think of, in the factory, when these are programmed, there's this protocol called the Joint Test Action Group, JTAG. Has anybody heard of JTAG around? So JTAG is one of your interfaces. You're going to actually program this module through JTAG, and generally there's 5 pins. If you randomize these, so let's say, this is just for example, let's say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the hacker would have to know where each one is randomly placed on the board to be able to interface with JTAG. If you randomize that, that's a good security defense. Somebody said to me on LinkedIn, they said, but isn't that just security through obscurity? You're randomizing the stuff. I said, well, kind of, but it also makes the hacker have to work harder. So yeah, maybe it is security through obscurity, but that can help at times. More time and effort to hack the system. The other thing that I'm going to bring up, in these chips, has anybody heard of a hardware security module, or like a security processor? This is something in automotive now that has been added to the new systems on chip. On here, if you look at this architecture diagram, it's basically, so you have your normal host processor that does all the application stuff for the vehicle to run, and then you have a separate processor that's just for security critical functions. So you separate, because you have a dedicated security processor, architecturally this is just much stronger than having your security critical algorithms run on your host processing unit. So the hackers have to if they get into the system, they have to work even harder to get to that hardware security module. And again, all of this takes place inside the system on chip. So inside this chip, there's the main processing cores, and there's the security processing core. And it's all isolated from the unit. Which brings me to the next defense. So we're moving from hardware to cryptographic defenses. So I'll go over this pretty briefly. Your cryptography is that's what makes the hacker have to work the hardest. If you add cryptographic defenses for encryption or for authentication, this is going to make the hacker's life almost impossible. Because breaking these algorithms, yeah, there's maybe some top secret government labs that can possibly break them, but theoretically the math behind them is they're supposed to be uncrackable for these algorithms that we use. So the cryptographic algorithms is a strong part of automotive security. So having high-strength security authentication algorithms, using symmetric keys in a proper way. If you're going to use symmetric keys, avoiding reusing keys across different, like I wouldn't use the same symmetric key across the same part as another part. Also, with these algorithms, hackers do figure out how to break them over time, and so you have to make sure you're not using like for example, for hashing, you can't use SHA-1 anymore because hackers have broken that one. So you have to use at least the highest strength crypto algorithms. Using a true random number generator and having random number generation is also part of your crypto defenses. Inside these chips, give me just 1 second. As I flew here, my voice decided to. I've had a hard time with my voice. It's been going out. No, I'm good. I got that full. I was prepared because I knew it was going to happen. So hardware acceleration is just that they have these cryptographic algorithms like SHA 256 or AES 128, and they actually make the hardware so it does it much quicker. It's like a dedicated circuit in the hardware that will do these calculations for you. So that's inside the hardware security module. Inside this HSM, you can see there's specific AES 128 and SHA 256 hardware acceleration for your cryptography. So again, that helps as a security engineer. And then also when you talk about adding cryptography to a system, you always have to talk about key storage. So the root of your secret is your keys. You have private keys that you want to keep secret and that nobody else can have. And so those are going to be stored in, even inside of this HSM, we can see, in this diagram I don't see it, but there should be another block diagram here where it has its own dedicated flash. So even inside of this chip, there's host flash. That would be where the host firmware is stored, and then there's hardware security flash, hardware security module flash, and so that makes it even harder. So I'm saying life is going to get harder for the hackers. It's going to be harder. Architecturally, we're going to be able to, I think, to make it so hard to hack these systems with how it is. Then we talk about, so we're moving from the hardware to actually what's running on your processor, your firmware. This is what, like the control algorithms that make, like when you press the button, the window goes down. It knows how to tell the peripheral that the window needs to go down now. Or if you turn the wheel, that your power steering is activated in the right way. This is all done by your algorithms in the firmware. And so signed firmware updates is something very critical. So one of the things in the hack with the Jeep was Miller and Valsec were able to just upload, actually Jay's done this as well, upload firmware that's backdoored. So it means I changed the firmware instructions. Whatever it was in flash memory that I wanted to execute, I can change it as a hacker. And Jay's done this to his infotainment unit. Now, if we make it harder to do during the update process, if we make it so there's a signature check that happens. So this block here is representing a firmware blob. And you would start we're abstracting like what it is. It's, at some memory address, you start here, and you go to an end memory address. You're going to have certain special instructions that tell the processor what to do. At the very end of it, you're going to have a digital signature. This signature can only be done by the private key that the manufacturer has. And so nobody else in the world has this private key. And so nobody's going to be able to impersonate this signature. And that's the part of the authenticity. So when you go through the update process, you're going to check this digital signature through a roundabout step. This is the process of getting it signed. This key over here represents the secret key that the manufacturer has. Nobody has that. So then when I go to check it, I get the public key in asymmetric cryptography, and I'm able to verify that this firmware is authentic. It's from Ford or it's from a Mazda. It's, nobody else could have created it unless they had this private key. And so firmware signing is a huge defense for the integrity and authenticity of that firmware. And again, this stops backdoor firmware from being accepted in the update process. So that's coming out new, and some of these hacks are going to get harder. Secure boot is another one. When you start your processor, all the memory that's in the flash memory, all the instructions in flash memory are going to start to execute. But if a hacker's changed them, you want to be able to detect that. So secure boot is a mechanism where when you start up this hardware security module, which is a dedicated core, remember that's the special security processor, it reads the memory first. It says, from this address to that address, I'm going to hash it. I'm going to do it's called a cipher-based message authentication code. It's just basically a code that I check and I know what it is. The hardware security module says, they can tell if anything has changed. So if a hacker's changed anything in these instructions in Flash, we're going to know, and then we're not going to boot the system. So that's another defense. And that is starting to become very standard in automotive. So you're going to catch malicious firmware modifications at boot time, and you're ensuring the firmware integrity. Over-the-air update patching. This is an interesting one in automotive. Does anybody own a vehicle that gets, you see like security or software updates are coming for it regularly? I think you were saying some of yours coming up.
For Mazda, it has OTA updates, but in the Philippines, it doesn't do that.
Okay, and there was one country where was it here where they don't? There was one country that you said in the conference where. Was it Singapore?
Singapore.
Yeah, Singapore doesn't allow over-the-air updates, which might be smart. I don't know. So the over-the-air update process means because this vehicle is hooked up to the internet, the manufacturer, if they say, "Oh, this firmware is actually written wrong. Some engineer made a mistake in their code." Well, we're just going to send an update for it. And so, or the other thing for security is, oh, somebody figured out an exploit on our code that was in the ECU or the vehicle. And now we're just going to patch it. Oh, we're going to patch it, and then we're going to send it down to the vehicles so they don't get hacked. And so that's a very critical defense. If this is not related to automotive, but if anybody wants to go watch this talk by Tony Chen from Microsoft, he talks about the Xbox One security and how this was the root of their security, being able to recover from software mistakes at any layer. So they would say, yeah, the hackers are going to spend so much time trying to get an application exploit, but then they'll just patch it. And then, oh, sorry, hackers, we're going to. So it really deters your hackers from wanting to attack your system because you're going to be able to get out of it. Yeah, so you're going to frustrate hackers. Good. I guess that keeps me employed, and so maybe I've become a hacker. I don't know. Operating system defenses. I'll go over this quickly. You have kind of like your normal computer type defenses where you have access control, whether that's discretionary access control or mandatory access control. You're keeping the resources, the applications that are running, you're keeping maybe just one user that's able to use it on the operating system. And not making so if a hacker was to get in as a user, maybe they could just run that one program. They couldn't run other programs or have access to different parts of the operating system. Like with App Armor, you can restrict the different resources that your app has. So maybe the app does not have the ability to reach out to the internet, or maybe the app does not have the ability to write to a file. This is stuff that's going to keep hackers out of your systems. Okay, so moving from operating systems, I'll go to file system defenses. The Linux file system, or you'd think of other file system is a set of files that are your instructions to how the operating system runs. A lot of utilities are in the file system. And so file system defenses is the next part of defenses I'll talk about. You need to be able to tell if these files have changed. It's really related to secure boot, but a lot of these file systems, like the utilities that you had, if you had like CAT or SSH, these programs that are there for you to use, if you had these, you would want to make sure that nobody's changed them. So one thing you can do for these executables that are in the file system is you mount this file system as a read-only file system. That means at the operating system level, I don't have access to write to these files. I can just read them and execute them, or read and execute. The other thing you can do for defenses in the file system is called Merkle file system integrity. Really, it's the ability to generate these hash trees that if you change, this is like kind of like the architecture of a hash tree. If you change, let's say this is a file here, down in the very bottom, a data block. Let's say I change data block L1, and I make it so it's malicious. Somehow now it's a malicious sort of executable in here. Then the hash that's contained of this changes, which affects everything upstream. The hash tree kind of goes up this hierarchy. So if this changes, this higher level hash changes, this hash changes, and then the top level hash changes. because this file changed. And so you're able to catch those changes in the file system and then alert the user that somebody's done something with your files. That's if you're in Android or I think Linux, dmverity is the utility that does this. So moving from hardware, we got into a little bit of operating system stuff. Now we're going into the middleware. So middleware, if you haven't heard of that, it's like how applications talk to each other. And usually it's over some sort of IP-based data that's sent over the IP network. Now this data, if you think back before we added security into like data, if I was sending data to Jay on his computer, maybe that it was back in the day it was just trusted, right? There was no authenticity to check if it was from me, and there was no way for you to tell if maybe somebody in the middle changed it. For middleware, we're actually now the whole security layer of the internet is built on what's called either transport layer security or the M is mutual transport layer security authentication. So if Jay and I have a connection on our computers from my computer to his, then I know through cryptography that it's Jay that's talking to me, and he knows through cryptography that I'm talking to him. And then we also are going to encrypt, we're going to do an exchange, so we have a private symmetric key that now we're going to encrypt all of our traffic between us. So it's very secure. That's the fundamentals of TLS. And if you get, it's again near impossible to break. So in the vehicle, we have these different IP-based units: the infotainment, the telematics, the gateway module, and the ADAS. And there is an actual vehicle switch and router that's generally on the gateway. And if the infotainment wants to send a packet of data to the gateway, it's generally going to use a mutually authenticated TLS connection. It will, to go between the two. So even if you're on this, if you gain access to this IP network, everything's going to be mutually authenticated and encrypted, so you're not going to get in. And that's shown through here. Again, we're adding keys, we're adding cryptography through the infotainment's private key in red, and the gateway's private key. They can do some math to say they for sure know that they're talking to each other, and then they can encrypt their traffic between themselves. The next part for middleware defenses is API authentication. So if you have we were talking about, I think some of the talks out there have referenced a lot of API security, and one of the downfalls might be if you have an API that says, do this for me, fetch me this file. There was a talk this morning about that, give me this file. If you add security on top of that with like a JSON web token, this signature gives you the ability to say, hey, it's me, I want to use this API, and I'm supposed to use this API, you can check my signature. So if you send this web token along with the request, it's verified, and then the API gives you back the data you want. That's also in the vehicle, we do that as well. And the other thing for middleware that you can keep control of, because it's an IP-based network, you can count how many client connections you have. So let's say normally I have 3 connections to other modules, and then there's another new connection that comes in. Just by counting, you know that something's wrong, right? You know it's a very static network. That's one thing that's different about the vehicle. These modules are all known. They have static IP addresses. The ARP table is static. Everything's static. How am I doing on time?
7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay.
Sorry, hey, just check out the date.
Okay, so we're getting to the upper levels. Then now you have your applications that are running, and you want to think about defenses like traditional on your PC. There's all sorts of layers of defenses that you can add. For the vehicle, we have things called, if you've heard of like a shadow stack. The stack is how the processor uses the stack to execute the code. Or in automotive, we also have, it's called lockstep cores. Now this is an element where we have 2 cores that are running the same set of instructions, And if one core says that it has a different calculation than the other core, then they know that either something has happened that's wrong. And so they're able to, that's for safety a lot of times, but also for security. That's as part of the architecture design. Has anybody heard of stack canaries? Anything like that? You can add, as you're executing code, these checks that make sure it's harder to take over the system. And then control flow monitoring graph. There are companies out there that I've worked with that they study your binary and they watch every function call and know that like maybe function A only ever goes to B or C. And so you basically make this graph where you know these functions call these functions, and that's how your normal operating of your program is supposed to work. So if now I somehow add an application layer exploit at G and I want it to go to B, then I can catch that. So that's part of control flow graph execution monitoring. That's interesting. I haven't had anybody do that on vehicle yet, but they've been talking about it. Secure logging. So again, if we have these like signals of compromise that we've talked about, now I'm going to log it in my flash memory, but also I'm going to export it out of the vehicle. So you can use the different vehicle buses, the CAN bus to send to the connected modules that go out to the modem, and then the OEM knows, oh yeah, somebody's trying to hack the system. And there's whole vehicle security operation centers. Like, has anybody worked in a SOC? Anybody know like security operation centers? Now there's vehicle security operation centers just for vehicles, where like Ford or Mazda or Toyota have these vehicle security operation centers, and if they see somebody trying to hack a vehicle, they'll know, so they'll know you. They'll know you coming up.
There's a command center for that?
Yeah.
Oh.
They're new, but they're mandated by some of the new UN regulations. The VSOCs are going to be interesting. That's a whole new job set.
I see.
They'll know
Maybe
him.
you guys are there.
Yeah. You'll be on the wall. Oh, it's those guys from Singapore. Oh, I'm trying to hack our vehicle again. Okay.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Other application defenses. This is a big one, actually, for the CAN injection attacks. Now, this has not been added to most new model years. In the next year or two, I know, at least in some of the stuff that Ford's working on, where I came from, they're adding this to it'll be standard on some of the powertrain control. So you add, let's say you have a message that says, hey, I want to run the motors. Traditionally, you could replay that message, but now they're going to add this message authentication code with a key. If you don't have that key, you can't produce the code, you can't you can't spoof the message. So this is going to be new on the CAN bus. It is pretty difficult to implement, but that's new, and it's going to be a big security protection for the powertrain.
Is that like the same with the seed key, or that's a different thing?
That's also, I'll talk about it in just a minute. The C key is also changing as well.
Yeah.
So again, this is CAN bus is a flat network, which means if ECUA sends out a message on the bus, everybody on the bus gets it. B, C, D, they all check. Maybe it sends 001. There's these identifiers, and everybody gets it. It's a broadcast network, and so by adding that message authentication, you control who can produce the messages, and then you're only going to trust the messages that you can check the max on. We have Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is getting back to your comment on UDS authentication. UDS is Universal Diagnostic Services. If you plug into the OBD2 port and you want to get diagnostics to say, well, why is this engine control light on my vehicle? You have to go through the UDS services. Traditionally, if you wanted to get any advanced, like security-related services from those modules, you'd have to go what's called Service 27. Or now it's called Service 29, which is the improved security one. Service 27, I've seen a lot of makers, they used to do pretty poor security algorithms to prove that you could have security access. An example of one I saw like 2 weeks ago, somebody was giving a talk at Secure Our Streets, and they said their security algorithm security algorithm to get advanced functions on this ECU was like some addition of some magic number to it, and I was like, but that's what the algorithm was. So now we're actually using traditional cryptography in Service 27 or Service 29. So strong algorithms. That's what I was getting at with Schwarzenegger. So no more weak algorithms. It's going to be strong algorithms. It's going to be much harder. And that's in here. Yeah, we're talking about diagnostic defenses. As a user, that's generally the only time you're going to interact with your ECUs because you need to fix your car, or your mechanic needs to fix your car. And so they're going to need to have the proper security access from the manufacturer to be able to get in through those cryptographic algorithms. Some best practices here, UDS, service removal. This is like, there's a whole set of service identifiers that the standard calls out. Some of them are not very safe, so we don't use service 23, which is read memory by address. We don't use service 3D, which is write memory by address. We don't use service 35. We just don't. Even though the standard says that we don't compile those services in. We don't use them. We remove XCP or CCP. These are calibration protocols. So one of the defenses you can say, well, yeah, maybe during manufacturing I have these protocols because I have to change certain. I'm trying to tune my engine, or I'm trying to tune the vehicle, and I need to change values in Flash. Great, use it during development, but in production, those instructions are just going to be, they're not even in the module anymore, so you can't hack it that way. The other thing is these calibration files, that's the data files that contain, for your engine, maybe special numbers that your engine uses to run. And maybe it's like some fuel mixture ratio or something like that. You're also going to have these cal files are protected for integrity and authenticity. Also, a lot of times they're protected through secure boot, and they're signed files. Oh, and this picture here was to show, this is the diagram of a stack for AutoSAR, and in here you have like your microcontroller, and it goes through the abstraction layers, and then you have XCP drivers. And here what I was saying is, basically for production you just leave that out. You don't, in the stack you don't have instructions anymore for XCP, so you can't hack it that way. Got about like 3 minutes. I'll have to go through this last one quick.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got network defenses. This is, so now we have the vehicle computers and the network. There's usually CAN bus or automotive Ethernet. You can have various levels of security defenses at the different layers. So this is new to automotive. It's called MAC security. That's layer 2 at the data link layer. You have to coordinate this security across all of your modules. It's actually in the hardware. So if you have different Ethernet talking modules, they all have to have certain keys all shared amongst them so they can all encrypt their traffic. Then you have traditional like IPsec and MTLS we talked about. So you're encrypting the different areas of the packets, and then API auth at the higher levels. But all these are security mechanisms that are common to IT networks. And in here, I guess, just to show you, but basically, as we were going up the stack, it just shows you, if this is the Ethernet frame, where you like the start of the frame, and then the CRC at the end, and then you encapsulate all the destination MAC, and the source MAC, and then you have like your Ethernet IP data in here, and then like all the TCP data over there. It's just showing, as you go up the stack, you're basically shifting the encryption to the inner layers. So Ethernet, or MACsec is like basically encrypting, I believe, from here on, and IP is like from here on, and then application related encryption is here on. So you can do it at different layers, and there's different security controls for each one. So in summary, yeah, here we go to finish. We have a whole new vehicle that's been created in the last 10 years with cybersecurity included in the design. We have hardened electronic control units. I know all of the manufacturers have now included security defenses at all the layers in our ECUs, and we have also hardened networks. So it's going to make the hackers work a lot harder. So that was my talk, and I want to see if there's any questions. So thank you guys.
Hi.
Yeah.
What's your stand on the right to own and right to repair movement
That's a
with
good question.
security limitations?
I have a little bit of, so the question was on right to repair. I believe in right to repair, I really do, because where I live, the farmers, right, the farmers are the ones that are kind of leading the right to repair in the United States because they want to fix their tractors. And I believe in it because I think if you have to go to the OEM and they're going to charge crazy rates to fix your tractor, that's not fair. And you should be able to have other service providers that can do it. Now, I think for security, you don't want to open this up. Well, let's say you have the OEM that's an option, and you have these other service providers. Cryptographically, you have to provide access tokens to the service providers. And then there's role-based access control on all of these computers now. So I might give you a maintenance level access. I'll give you a token that will allow you to do your maintenance on your vehicle, but I'm going to allow it. And I think that's the right way to do it. So security is controlled. Your role is controlled as a maintenance tech. You don't have full access to the ECU, like you can't change the security functions of it, but you're going to be able to do what you need to do to repair it. So
Has that been done?
it's starting to be done. Yes, some of the current projects I'm working on have had that, and I'd say it's newer. So I'd say we'll see this in the next few years, where Service 29 means you have to basically as a maintenance tech, you're going to have communication or an application where you're registered with the OEM. You say, I want to work on this module. Can I do it? And then they probably will have to verify all your stuff, and then you'll get a token sent to you that will allow you to do it.
But not the owner of the vehicle.
Possibly the owner, if the owner's skilled and wants to do it. I think, yeah. So I think the option's there. Any other questions related to automotive security?
Why AES-128? Is it because you're using a 32-bit CPU?
Yeah, that's a good one. The automotive, we use AES-128 in automotive just because of time, basically.
And
they're real-time systems, and we do use lesser grade encryption because we want to have real-time performance, and so a lot of times we'll use the weaker algorithms. They justify it. They say, yeah, this is strong enough, but yeah, it's lower grade.
That's a good point,
Yeah. Cool. That was a good question. Good questions. Any other final questions?
What's white box encryption? I have no idea.
Is that on here, or is that on a different slide?
It was from a different slide.
White box encryption, I don't know all that much about it. There's service providers that will say that it's kind of like a proprietary form of encryption. Like on your phones, I know there's certain service providers that will say it's to prevent reverse engineering of your app. So if you have an app and it has implemented white box encryption, let's say that the calculator, all these instructions have been encrypted, so your phone can decrypt it. But if I'm going to pull this binary off the phone, it's going to be in an encrypted form. And so white box encryption is kind of I don't know the technical detail. There's companies that would claim that they have these different encryption algorithms that are suitable for processing, like the phone can process and know and decrypt, but it's safe to prevent reverse engineering. But I saw that at Ford. They were hiring some company to try for their mobile app to try to have white box encryption in it. And, okay, so just as I end, I wanted to say thank you to Jay and my friends from Singapore as well. Thank you guys for the Car Hacking Village and for putting it on. I really enjoyed. One thing I love about automotive security, it's a global workforce. Everybody from all over the world, every country contributes. That's my favorite thing, getting to come to stuff like this and work with people in the Philippines or Singapore or India or Japan, all over. The automotive, that's how we get around that, right? So that's one thing I really like about automotive is the supply chain is global and we get to work together on it. So thank you guys. I enjoyed coming and hope to come back.
Yeah.